Today I'll be reading chapter 5 of The Art of Walk. Let's begin. Chapter 5. Pivot Points. Why failure is your friend. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Then quit. There's no point in being intentful about it. W.C. Fields. It will take a few tries before you get your calling right. Failure isn't what prevents us from success. Then, it's what leads us there. Matt McWilliams always assumed he would grow up to become a golf pro. Born just 500 yards from the second green of Pinehurst, number 2, a North Carolina resort known as the cradle of American golf. He thought it was his destiny to follow in his father's footsteps. What he never could have imagined, though, was that his own dad would have to fire him, and he would continue to face rejection for the next several years, after all of which would somehow lead to his calling. In high school, Matt won 4 out of 5 major junior golf tournaments in Tennessee, including the Tennessee State High School Championship. In college, he won the Adams Cup of Newport, the Berry College Spring Invitational, Carolina Amateur, and others. He was the number 1 player at the University of Tennessee and was so confident that golf was where his future lay that he didn't bother to graduate. Matt went on to play professional golf for a year until one day, when an acute pain in his wrist that started in college began to worsen. The pain crept all the way up to left side of his body and eventually became so crippling that he was forced to see a doctor. Diagnosed with acute tendonitis, he was told he could never undergo serious surgery or get back on golf. He opted for the latter. That's when he decided he didn't want to play the game as badly as he thought he did. But what else could he do? Golf was all he had ever known, all he had never ever expected, and all he had ever wanted. And now, unexpectedly, the plan was changing. In the pursuit of our life's walk, we will encounter obstacles, challenges that we think are a distraction to the cause, something to overcome. But in fact, these very obstacles are sometimes the means to success. With nowhere to turn, Matt went to work for his dad at Knollwood Fairways in Southern Pines, North Carolina. Working at the course as an instructor, he discovered a new skill: online marketing. Most nights, he would stay up late building websites and advertising campaigns for golf classes that, ironically, he had no desire to teach. He had absolutely no interest in the business he was helping out. But the marketing, he left that part. Something he never would have learned if everything had gone according to plan. Realizing he had a knack for attracting new clients, Matt started his own company, First Lane Consulting, as a side project in 2002 while still working at the golf course. But on July 1st, 2003, a date Matt remembers because it was the day after his birthday, the unexpected happened. His dad let him go. The timing wasn't great, but he knew it had been coming. It should have happened a lot sooner, Matt admitted. That was the first time he got fired. During the summer of 2004, Matt spent half his time working with the congressional political campaign in North Carolina, and the other half doing online marketing for consulting clients. This was the time when he continued to hone his online marketing skills, further falling in love with how words and images could motivate people. I could spend 36 hours straight designing a website without any sleep, he recalled. By the end of the campaign, Matt's clients no longer need his services. Once again, he was about to face unemployment, and he didn't have a plan for what would come next. Running out of cash and living at home, he was relieved when a friend called asking him to design an insurance website. It was just like the kind of project he had been praying for, and it came at just the right time. But it was only one gig, and Matt needed more stability as he was getting older and wondering what he would do with the rest of his life. Shortly after that project was completed, the friend called again, this time inviting Matt to help him start a new company, one that would generate sales leads for insurance companies. At first, Matt said no. He liked working for himself and enjoyed the freedom of being his own boss. But the friend asked again. He still said no. By the time, though things were starting to look desperate, with the business slowing down, he had fewer and fewer options, so he finally succumbed to his friend's offer. In December 2004, they went into business together. The first thing they did was hire a programmer. Matt did all the sales, affiliate management, and web design. He learned about sales and marketing, even how to do some basic programming. The days were long and the work was exhausting, but he loved it. By December 2007, the company had grown to 40 employees and more than $12 million in annual revenue. The company, based in Franklin, Tennessee, eventually grew to nearly $20 million, won several awards, and was thriving in almost every aspect except when it came to relationships. Matt was on top of the world. This was his dream job. At least, that's what he thought. But as his success grew, so did his ego. Notorious around the office for being a perfectionist and someone who would tear into you for the slightest infraction. Matt was a person who you didn't want to be caught alone in a hallway. You never knew what he might say. One day, the two owners approached him, and as nicely as they could, they asked Matt to leave. He had been treating people poorly, and without knowing or caring, he was leaving a lot of carnage around the office, which they had to clean up. That was the second time Matt was fired. He was 27 years old, and it happened just 15 days before his wedding. Taking 6 months off to enjoy his marriage and embark on what he calls a spiritual journey, Matt went back to work in May 2009, joining a company in Nashville that sold instructional DVDs. The next year, he won the Affiliate Manager of the Year award at Affiliate Summit and ended up leading all their online marketing after that. The job lasted 2 years. During his second year, Matt had a nagging thought about starting his own consulting business and brought it up to his boss, who gave his blessing and even offered Matt some advice. In February 2011, he left the company to return to his first job, the same place from which he had been fired 2.5 years earlier, but his second stint was even shorter than the first. One Friday night during dinner, after he had been working there for 9 months, Matt was complaining to his wife about the job, which had become a usual occurrence. His wife, who'd finally had enough, said he needed to decide when he was going to quit, which he agreed to and told her once he went into the office the next day, he would set a date to leave. The next day, a private detective showed up at McWilliams' front door and said, "I'm here to collect your work laptop." That's how Matt found out he was laid off. And that was the day he decided to expand his part-time consulting business into a full-time endeavor. Now, Matt lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but his business is wherever his clients are. San Francisco, Boston, New York, Chicago, Washington. His story is not the typical tale of a little boy who always knew what he was going to do with his life, and after overcoming insurmountable obstacles, finally persevered to find his dream. His journey is like a lot of us, full of failures and unexpected mishaps, frustrating moments that when you question what you're doing, for those familiar with the confusion of not knowing if you're pursuing the right thing. Matt McWilliams' story offers a subtle encouragement. There's room to get your calling wrong. And though through all the twists and turns, after repeated rejection, something beautiful emerged. Matt found his calling, not in the way you would expect, of course, but by now, we should be expecting that. He didn't come to his life's work by success. He found it through failure. The power of the pivot. In basketball, you are only allowed to take 2 steps once you stop dribbling the ball. When you take that last step, the food you land on becomes what's called a pivot food. The food must remain fixed, but the other food can freely move about, allowing you to easily spin around and find a teammate to whom you can pass the ball. You can even pivot after dribbling the ball, allowing you to change direction before moving down the court. Although you are confined to where you are and how many steps you can take, at no point you are locked into any direction. That's the beauty of the move. Even when all other opportunities are exhausted, you can still pivot. In 2006, Andrew Mason was about to attempt something big, a graduate student pursuing public policy degree. At the University of Chicago, he was doing some contract work on the side, building databases at a company founded by an entrepreneur named Eric Lefkowsky. In 2007, backed by Lefkowsky, Mason launched a company called 𝕎𝕠𝕣, a website intended to bring groups of people together to solve problems. The idea was that a person could use social media to get people to rally together around a specific cause and then motivate them to act. Nobody cared much about making money. It was about making a difference. The startup, in spite of its good intentions, didn't take off. To make matters worse, when the recession hit in 2007, they needed money. And without a business model, 𝕎𝕠𝕣 was in trouble. Normally, the team would use the website to organize people around a cause. But this time, they wanted to try something new. At the prodding of Lefkowsky, what if their cause this time was to save money? This idea, born out of financial distress, was to get 20 people to buy the same product and try to get a group discount. Although this concept had been introduced in the original business plan, when Lefkowsky brought it up again more than a year later, Mason and the other team members shot it down. This time, Lefkowsky wouldn't let it go. When the economy continued to spiral downward in late 2008, the company was forced to lay people off. They knew it was time for a change. There was this pressure from the market crash, and looking at our burn rate, and revenue, it was time for us to try something to scratch that itch, a source from the company told Business Insider. And that's how Groupon, a company valued at almost $13 billion at the time of its IPO in 2011, was born. How did they do it? They certainly didn't plan for any of it at the start. They did something much more effective. They pursued a strategy that has served entrepreneurs well since the dawn of business. They pivoted. A pivot is powerful because it takes away all your excuses. It puts you back into control of the game you're playing. Pivoting isn't plan B. It's a part of the process. Unexpected things will happen. Setbacks do occur. Whether or not you're prepared to pivot will affect how well you weather those storms and find a way to survive. We often look at successful people, hearing their stories of failures, and think that they succeeded despite the fact that they failed. But that's not true. Successful people and organizations don't succeed in spite of failure. They succeed because of it. In case of Groupon, a failed philanthropy effort led to a for-profit enterprise that succeeded in ways the original founders never imagined. Sometimes failure is the best thing that can happen to you if you learn to listen to the lessons in it. The world can be cruel. It's nobody's responsibility to make your dream come true. Tough time will come, and what determines a person's success during such trying times is the ability to pivot. Every calling encounters setbacks, and sometimes people don't want what you have to offer. Maybe they just don't understand it. Other times, life throws a curveball, or the passion you once had wanes. At times like these, we are inclined to give up. But these are the moments that require our most intentional action. In any pursuit, the temptation is to go it alone, to subscribe to a few blogs, read a business book, and start acting like an expert. We praise such entrepreneurial initiative thinking. It's what drives modern innovation, but we couldn't be more wrong. Every great endeavor begins with a smaller, less significant one. This is the season of failure that marks critical preparation, steps of history's heroes. Albert Einstein walked in a patent office. Benjamin Franklin was forced to flee his hometown. Steve Jobs got kicked out of his own company. We all face times of irrelevance, of falling on our faces and thinking we have no business doing any of this. But pain is the great teacher and failure a faithful mentor. You can use all of this to your benefit if you're willing. Einstein used his menial job to conduct thought experiments. Franklin took his rejection and learned from it, trying to better understand people and later using what he learned as a diplomat, turning every shortcoming into strength. Jobs practiced playing CEO at Pixar, a smaller company where it was easier to fail, before returning to Apple to bring it back to life. Failure is the best friend you will ever have, if you learn from it. As Robert Greene wrote in his book Mastery, repeated failure will toughen your spirit and show you with absolute clarity how things must be done. How did Matt McWilliams turn his failure into success? He startlingly didn't know where he was headed. There was no plan. When facing failure, Matt was realistic. He didn't accept defeat, but neither did he try to push through the doors that had closed. Instead, he did something creative. Just as Matt and Hugh Mason did, he pivoted, turning in a new direction and eventually finding his way. A season of failure. Contrary to popular belief, Sam Adams never made beer. Beyond the Boston lager that bears his name, the world has largely forgotten who this man was, but to the founding fathers of the United States, he was an important and influential figure, and a man well acquainted with failure, a portly man who led the nation and its leaders with words. Adams roused a multitude of action through his numerous newspaper opinions, articles, and speeches. He was, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, truly the man of revolution. His second cousin John called him zealous, ardent, and keen in the cause. But before he commanded the respect of some of America's greatest heroes, he spent a good part of his life pivoting from one failure to the next. First, he tried to be a lawyer, and when that didn't work, he tried to be a maltster, a person who makes malt that is later used to make beer. Later, he tried his hand at business and failed at that too. No matter what he tried, success seemed to evade Samuel and his family, who had high hopes for him. Was beginning to worry he might not amount to much. It wasn't until he became involved in politics, initially through writing and attending town hall meetings, that he became alive, finding the thing he was born to do. Through his writings, he became the voice of the American Revolution, and it was the voice that roused others like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams to the cause. After the war, he remained in politics but never became president. He was content with the governorship of his home state, Massachusetts, where he lived out the remainder of his days. Were it not for his tenacity, his willingness to keep trying things until he found the right path, Samuel Adams never would have found his purpose, and a nation may have never been born. Every calling is marked by a season of insignificance, a period when nothing seems to make sense. This is the time of wandering in the wilderness. When you feel alone and misunderstood to the outsider, such a time looks like failure, as if you are grasping at air or simply wasting time. But the reality is, this is the most important experience a person can have if they make the most of it. As many do, you may be wondering what you are supposed to do with your life. Everything seems confusing and overwhelming. Your parents told you one thing, while your peers say something different. Who do you trust? Where do you focus? Traditional advice says to have a plan. But as we have seen, plans don't always work. When pursuing life's walk, Your calling can be hard to see. Sometimes it has to be revealed. And the way this often happens is through failure. When Matt McWilliams told me his story, I heard pieces of my own journey. I recalled those 7 years of working for a non-profit and the previous year of travel. I never felt like I had found my place, but had a nagging suspicion that I was headed somewhere. By the end of the conversation, we both learned something. When we feel farthest from our purpose, we are actually already on the path, headed in the right direction. This means that when you are confused and failing, when all seems lost and you are just about to give up, you are closer to your destiny than you realize. The message of the pivot is that what looks like failure now is preparation for what's to come. As long as you don't give up, so who separates a season of failure from a lifetime of failure? First, you must be willing to recognize hardship as an opportunity to learn, willing yourself to push through failure. Second, you must be careful to not succeed at the wrong things. You have to pay attention to passion and beware of the temptation of success. It's not enough to be good at something. You must focus on what you are meant to do and appreciate that your understanding of that over time just might change. So be ready to make more pivots along the way. This was what Mother Teresa learned when beginning her ministry. After spending 20 years as a nun and school teacher, she faced a crisis that would force her to reevaluate everything. While riding on the train, she felt suddenly compelled to serve the poor, to not only give to the impoverished but also identify with them and become a part of their community. Trading her habit for a sari, she started the Missionaries of Charity, a new order that focused on this mission. It was a bold move and one that would make years of discernment before becoming a reality. But it was a vision she was certain of, something she could not avoid doing. She called this moment of inspiration a call within a call. And what this means is your vocation can evolve. Early in life, we start out on a certain path. As life continues, we settle down and have kids and maybe get a little wiser and find ourselves questioning earlier motivations and actions. We wonder if we were just foolish or idealistic. Equipped with a better understanding of the world now, we now see things more clearly. We grow up. We may drift into complacency on occasion, but life also tends to stabilize and we make better decisions. So it makes sense that as we grow, our understanding of calling will grow and expand and change too. A calling is not merely a moment, it's a life cycle, a constant progression of submitting to a larger purpose. When you are first called, whether it comes as a whisper or a roar, what you hear is only part of the big picture, a shadow of something bigger. And as you move toward your life's walk, you must deepen that awareness, looking for signs to hone your understanding and for opportunities to change direction along the way. This is good news because it means we can fail. We can miss the mark without veering completely off course. We can change directions and try new things. Learning as we go, your life's walk is not a single event, but a process you are constantly perfecting. Finding new ways to put your passion to work, and you do that one pivot at a time. Life is not a dream. A while ago, I called my friend Jonathan for some advice. He had started a publishing company, which was a dream of his for a number of years, and I wanted to know more about how that happened. What led to Jonathan's transformation in perspective, turning him from a dreamer into a doer. At first he was reluctant to share, but I kept prodding until he caved. Finally, he said what changed for him was one simple phrase. Everything began to change after that, all thanks to a small but significant shift in vocabulary. Every week, Jonathan and his friends would get together for dinner, gathering around the kitchen table to talk about their hopes and dreams and what they would do with their lives someday. One night, he recalled, we were all sitting around my kitchen table, talking like we always did. We were thinking about what life would be like when our dreams come true. If only circumstances were different, And then someone spoke up and said, what if we stopped saying what if and started saying let's? Instead of what if, say let's. That was it for Jonathan. It was the challenge he needed to get started with his dream. Instead of saying what if, he started saying let's. He ditched the dreams and instead became a person of action. When I spoke with him on the phone, I could tell something had changed. He was a new man. It was a small shift, a minor pivot, but it made all the difference. The lesson is clear. We can spend our days dreaming of a better life or do the messy work of getting started today. You are not waiting on your calling. Your calling is waiting on you. And you can sit around playing the what if game until you are exhausted. Or you can begin by saying that one little word that changed everything. Let. In the Spanish play, Life is a Dream by Pedro Calderón de la Barca, the protagonist, Segismundo, has been locked up in a tower for most of his life and delivers a monologue in which he describes life as nothing more than a dream. He says, what is life? A tale that is told. What is life? A fancy, a stream, a shadow of things that seem, and the greatest good but small. That all life is, a dream to all. And that dreams themselves are a dream. It's a profound and poetic monologue. The most famous in the play, but it's also a little depressing. What Segismundo was saying is that life itself is a fantasy, and what we think we know is an illusion. This, unfortunately, is how many live their lives, thinking of a true calling as nothing more than an unrealized dream. They squander their passion and rob the world of a gift, their action. At the end of their lives, as their story fades into eternity, they will wonder, was it worth it? Did I do all I had to do? Or did I play it safe? On our deathbeds, we will see things with the most clarity we have ever had. Each of us will have to face the facts of how we spend our lives, especially when we had the opportunity to act and didn't. What I fear more than anything about that day is how I will have to answer for all the times I didn't live up to my potential. Why I didn't embrace my calling more fully. And what will my reason be? I was scared, fear, we all feel it. It's a force that afflicts even the most courageous. So what do we do about it? We lean in, realizing that failure is inevitable. But it's also not a legitimate obstacle. We can keep moving, albeit sometimes in a different direction. This is where your story starts to matter, when you begin to make a difference with the talents and skills you've acquired. It's where ideas and action meet, where we stop dreaming and start living. This is tension here in the place of action. And risk is inevitable, but the rewards are great. What we do with this moment will carry on for eternity. When you leave behind for prosperity isn't a decision you make on your deathbed. It's a choice that happens right now, with the resources available at this very moment. There is, of course, an alternative. We could opt out, becoming bitter about the whole thing. We could believe this process of pursuing a passion is a farce. Like Segismundo, we could even get so lost in our own dream walls that we aren't sure what is real. Certainly, that's an option. The problem, though, is that nobody gets changed by an ideal. Nothing gets shaken by a dream. And the world remains the same, regardless of how great your idea is. It's only when people take action that true transformation happens. Don't get me wrong, dreams are powerful. They are fuel for change. But by themselves, they do no good. They do no good. Hanging out in coffee shops and talking about one day being a writer or an activist or an entrepreneur is just about the worst thing you can do. It feels like work, but is in fact destructive to the real work of realizing your dream. So what do? Stop talking and start doing. Don't dream of being a writer, begin writing. Don't dream of being an activist, go start something. Don't dream of being an entrepreneur, launch something. I recently caught up with Jonathan. He started that publishing company and ran it for several years. But as life moved on, his passion steered him in a new direction. So he ended that business and started something else. And as it turns out, the publishing company was just one more step in the journey. Had he never begun, he would never have ended where he is today. The point isn't that he succeeded, he would say he didn't. Not with publishing company anyway. The point is he tried. He didn't stay stuck in that dream and instead adopted an attitude of doing. Anything less than such proactivity is a cheap imitation of life that you are meant to live. It's stalling instead of letting it stop you in your tracks. Why not do what Jonathan did and pivot them in a new direction? You might be surprised by the opportunities that present themselves. The hidden message of failure. Not all pivots have happy endings. In 1939, German pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer set sail for America, a trip that marked a crucial turning point in his life. If he went in one direction, he might surely die. If he went in the other, he would never be able to live with himself. A year earlier, thanks to his brother-in-law, he had met the members of German Resistance, an underground group whose primary goal was to drum up support for a military-led coup against Hitler. From this meeting, he learned that the world was on the brink of war, and that Germany's chancellor was more dangerous than most realized. A committed pacifist outspoken against the Nazis, Bonhoeffer would never enlist in military service. At the same time, he knew not doing so might create complications for the charge, as it would be viewed as an official stance. Unsure of what to do, he left for the United States. Invited by Union Theological Seminary in New York. Shortly after arriving, he regretted his decision. Some knew the danger he was in and the tough position he faced. So they urged him to stay, but he refused. In a letter to his friend Reinhold Niebuhr, Bonhoeffer described the two choices he had: stay in America and live, or go back to Germany and possibly be killed. He wrote, "I know which of these alternatives I must choose, but I cannot make that choice from security." He returned to Germany, where he was eventually harassed, detained, and executed for a plot to assassinate Hitler. He was hanged at Flossenburg concentration camp, just 2 weeks before American soldiers arrived to liberate the camp. The decision Bonhoeffer made in New York didn't lead to success. It didn't make him rich or famous, but it was the only decision he could make, one that agreed with his conscience, and a crucial turning point in his life. That one decision cost him his life. As he wrote in a letter a few years earlier, "My calling is quite clear to me. What God will make of it, I do not know. I must follow the path. Perhaps it will not be such a long one. Sometimes a calling is a means to a more comfortable life. Sometimes we don't pivot in that direction of personal success, but toward even greater pain. But here's the catch. A calling will always lead you to a life that matters, one you can be proud of. The way that we get there, though, isn't always up to us. Sometimes the path can be costly, even deadly. But what lies at the end of the road is a price that many can buy and a legacy the world won't forget. It was the second best thing that ever happened to me. Matt McMillians told me of the first time he was fired by his friends. The best was the second time they fired him, forcing him on a journey filled with unexpected twists and turns that ultimately led to his life's walk. It was at times difficult, even painful, but the pain was worth the reward. That is all for chapter 5. Tomorrow I'll be reading chapter 6, so make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. And sorry, I'm a little sneezy today. That's all for today, guys. See you in the next one.